We're live. Welcome back to Coast-to-Coast EVs, number 5, if my count's correct. Fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and EV infrastructure, and the first of 2024. Happy New Year. Eric Way to my left, News Coolum channel. Mr. Walter Schulze, just down below, of the Network Architect channel, abbreviated to TNAC for good access. How are we both doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, we made it.
Yeah, got through. We debated whether we were going to do tonight and decided we have the skills to wing one at least. And actually, it turns out to be quite a lot of news coming out. We haven't been able to decide what we're going to exactly focus on, but there's no shortage of news to come through, right? So welcome, everybody. I've kind of preceded some requests in the comments, but let us know where you are, if you're whether you're new or a regular. And let's see, one EV that you would like to get in this year, or you would like to see succeed, however you choose to take it. Let us know what EV you're focusing on that we haven't seen on the roads yet to date. Interesting starter question, hopefully. But for our first topic here, we're kind of going to mix and match some of the news that's been coming through. We're starting to see dribs and drabs of 2023 EV sales numbers and automaker sales overall, all of which seems to be heading in the right direction, and put 2023 as a positive year after a lull in 2022, thanks to post-pandemic and supply chain issues and all the stuff we've discussed before. But we're also seeing some challenges with the EV tax credit. Certainly the new system point of sale was much lauded, but it's proving a little bit of a problem for dealers by the sound of it, and a lot of models haven't quite been qualified yet. So I think we'll segue into that, because the GM models, the Bolt still qualifies, which is great, except that it's going away.
Right.
And the Cadillac Lyriq, I believe the Chevy Silverado EV, Chevy Blazer EV, all of those, I think you were saying, Eric, are getting a kind of bridging discount from General Motors, from what we can tell, whilst they don't qualify at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's specifically the Blazer and the Lyriq, and so GM sent out a notice letting dealerships know that they're going to be doing a credit. Now, I saw a follow-up story on Detroit Press, and apparently it was paywalled, so I couldn't actually see the details of the article, because what I got was a notice from someone who actually works at a dealership. So GM basically already set that out, because the news had hit that certain Lyriq and certain Blazer EVs wouldn't qualify for the tax credit. And so what this is basically a point of sale $7,500 off to compensate for the fact that they're not eligible for that tax credit. So it's basically, as far as the consumer is concerned, should be breaking it even. The concerning thing I saw in that Detroit Press, at least the headline lead line, was that it might be for leases only. But that wasn't something that I saw from the dealer that posted that announcement. So I would say, if you're interested in those vehicles, don't let the lack of a tax credit, drive you away. Check with your dealership and see if they can offer that $7,500 credit.
Yeah, it sounds like those are coming through, and from what I could tell, it was something to do with either not being able to file the paperwork in time, or still having to kind of get the official confirmation. This happened, I think, around that April deadline that we have, when it switched over back last year. A lot of models started off qualifying and then kind of didn't qualify. Then eventually they kind of dribbled in through late April, early May.
Can I just say, as someone who took advantage of that tax credit over 10 years ago, when it first went into place for the Chevrolet Volt and other plug-in vehicles at the time, it was executed very cleanly then. Like, I don't know why they botched it so horribly this time around. It seems like at every turn of the corner, like you said, paperwork didn't get filed, and it's all clerical. And yet it's the consumers who they're supposed to be encouraging to buy EVs who are getting hurt by it. So I just can't fathom how they were so inept at executing it this time.
Yeah, multiple times as well. Every time there's a piece of news that seems good, a new model qualifiers, or there's a feature like giving it back a point of sale that is exciting customers. It's hamstrung by some kind of bureaucratic red tape. Walter, what are you seeing in the news these first couple of days? Any feelings on the, well, as a Lyric owner, it's obviously be something we'd like to see get out there into more drivers' hands.
Yeah, my typical sources, Clean Technica, Autoline Daily, were basically down. I lost my Clean Technica for a while. It was getting pushed over into promotion folder or whatever, and then I cleared that up. But I seem to remember hearing that the GM pause was only going to be a very short duration. And I mean, the Ultium batteries are made in the United States. That's one of the whole advantages of the strategy that GM is doing. And Eric mentioned the off form factor of pouch versus cylindrical is a bit of a risk. However, they do gain the advantage of in-house vertical integration of domestically made batteries specifically for this purpose, not only the tax credit, but the long-term benefit of having things made domestically and not have to worry about geopolitics. But I think, if I remember correctly, when I was paying attention, somewhere in late December, it was mentioned, yeah, this is going to happen, but it's only going to be a short blip. And somewhere around, I think it was Valentine's Day, it was going to be reinstated, but I might be speaking out of turn.
Yeah, it definitely, this is a stopgap. This credit is just there to cover the cars that fall into that gap. So.
And then, of course, it's always worth mentioning that the lease loophole, because the leases are commercial vehicles or classed as commercial vehicles, pretty much everybody seems to be passing those on. So if you are kind of on the edge of whether to lease or buy, and if the manufacturer is leaning into them, as folks like Hyundai, Kia, and some of the others are doing, then a lease may be an option to kind of jump into one of the New Year deals, if such as they are. Bob White asks, where can I buy me a Silverado EV? Might have to go and work for one of the agencies that's getting the first few.
Yeah, they're fleet only, right? But I mean, I did hear from someone who didn't want to go on record that works apparently in Factory Zero, that said that they were fitting the panels for the RST on the assembly line. So that was like 2 months ago. So I think they're on track to start doing the customer only deliveries. It's just a matter of when. My guess would be probably spring of 2024 would be my guess.
Bob's from Muskegon, Michigan, which is a beautiful part of the world, and not far from where they're being produced, right? Or are they down in Spring Hill, Tennessee? I forget the plant there.
No, Zero's in Detroit.
Okay. Is Bob's not in Zero E, Michigan, is he? Are you?
No.
Okay. Just getting my Michigans confused. Okay, Bob, let us know if you have a channel, though. We'll pop that up. Let's see. Okay, so in terms of the tax credit as a whole, in long term, is it the right move to kind of really start phasing out credits for what they were calling FIOCs, foreign entities of concern? And I mean, it seems from the investment that we're getting and some of the plants that are being built, especially both on the hardware side, with Kempower releasing their first hardware this week that was built down in Georgia, I think, and the a lot of the battery plants coming to areas in the southeast, probably not too far from you, Walter, that part of it has worked. So there's just this gap that kind of, obviously it's not great for people who are buying right now, but as we'll get on to, there's a lot of changes this year. Maybe in the long term, this helps the US produce these vehicles more reliably and not hit these kind of, stops in production or kind of gaps where we have to kind of really start to dial in the production and supply chains.
The tax credit structure is good natured, and obviously the encouragement for people to adopt EVs in order to knock down the EV premium, which I think at the time of the adoption of the Inflation Reduction Act, that I believe is where the tax credit is sourced from, somewhere about 30%. So it seemed to make sense to help accelerate EV adoption a little bit. cost curves are taking their toll, and we're starting to drop in price and getting close to price parity. So I think at some point, pruning those off will probably make sense, because at some point this decade, EVs are forecasted to cost less than internal combustion engine cars. And when you look at the number of moving parts versus an internal combustion engine car, obviously the battery is the expensive piece. It seems to make sense. So at some point in the future, giving a tax credit on a less expensive vehicle just doesn't make sense anymore. I believe that's what you were alluding to.
Yep, for sure. We've got Mike up in Canada giving the Canadian government some props there for the 5,000 incentive, which is pretty solid, and then that applying at the point of purchase, which is exactly what we're trying to get to here, obviously, albeit with mounds of paperwork and limited qualification slowing things down. Big Barney is not fond of the government, and who can blame him at the current juncture with all of us having some problems. Eric, you wanted to touch a little bit when we're just getting these EV sales numbers, so it's a little bit tough to or the overall sales numbers. It does look like things are heading in the right direction, but GM specifically released a lot of talking points today, and things seem to be going in the right direction, at least from the beginning of the year. What were you kind of taking away from that initial report?
Well, before I jump into that, because I also see Mike had mentioned this too, but the isolationism aspect of the credit, I think you were mentioning too, Steve. I have mixed feelings about it. Ultimately, though, I kind of feel it's a net benefit to not ship parts overseas, right? That's a big problem with internal combustion vehicles, is you're constantly getting your fuel from foreign sources, and we're clogging up shipping lanes and we're polluting the oceans and all of that. So sourcing domestically is the right thing to do on a number of fronts, domestic jobs and things like that. I just don't like this transition period where it's almost like, well, it gives us 5 more good years of selling gas cars because there's no offshore competition in the form of EVs. That's what I don't like about it. But I think ultimately, long term, it will be a good thing. And using that to segue in, you're right. We showed the GM released their sales numbers, and disappointing a little bit because Ultium, they're American built basically in all ways, shapes and forms, EVs, didn't hit anywhere close to their target, which I think was something like 50,000 Ultium EVs they wanted to sell in 2023. So they came well short of that. I think it was like 13,000. And the big number out of it was the exiting Bolt EV, right? Like they hit it out of the park with the Bolt EV, EUV, and the total sales were like 62,000 for January to December of 2023, which is a huge number for, basically a single model with 2 variations. But the thing that I'm really hoping, and this is why I'm hopeful for the numbers, is I think we can finally start getting away from, we keep hearing people say, oh, they built they haven't even built 100 Hummer EVs, and they haven't even built this, and they haven't even built that, or they're, 18 Silverado EVs in Q3. Well, just the deliveries for the Silverado EV last year were up to 461. So they're ramping up. So basically they went from 18 in Q3 to 443 in Q4. So that's a pretty quick ramp up. And if it keeps ramping up at that pace, we should see several thousand of them this quarter. And then maybe, I'm expecting that big jump, like I said, in spring of 2024. And they actually delivered 3,244 GMC Hummer EVs in 2023. That's a lot. That's a lot of battery. And then what was it? The Cadillac, just rolling up to that, was did they even have? Oh, there it is, Lyric. And they sold over 9,154 Cadillac Lyrics in 2023. So, and as a percentage, that's a 7,400% increase from 2022. So, like, yeah, they're really ramping up their production. And so, what I'm hopeful about is the trajectory up, less so than just the rote numbers, or okay, they only sold 13,000 Ultium, but that's 13,000 Ultium compared to less than 1,000 the year before. Yep. So that's you're talking about a huge ramp up, and we're expecting big things. Apparently the battery modules for the Ultium is what's been the holdup, according to what we saw out of a press release from like the Kami plant with Bright Drop. And we don't know who that tier 1 supplier was that they were working with for the tooling to build these modules. But whoever it was, they apparently dropped the ball. But if that's resolved by spring of this year, which is what was expected, then we should see a massive ramp up in Ultium production in 2024.
Walter, as a Lyric owning household, do those numbers disappoint you? Would you rather, was that what you expected, or do you kind of feel like that model in particular, with its price point and the selling points in that vehicle, just doesn't seem to be maximized at the moment, even at that 9,000 kind of level that Eric was talking about? What are your feelings around the sales numbers last year? Nope. Are you muted, or we lost you?
I am. Yeah, I wonder if we're looking at it through a PR optic, which we're purposefully being given information about the cell production, and what we really had was a quiet form of beta testing of the entire Ultium platform with a select subgroup of people, because as a debut edition owner of the Lyric, I can tell that it's been buggy. I woke up to go grocery shopping one Saturday morning, and the thing was bricked. I had to OnStar tow truck it into the dealership in order to get the 12-volt matter fixed. And there's been some other bugs, but it seems like it's starting to smooth out. And I almost wonder if it was like a purposeful slow roll in order to, because when you put a new platform out there, there's going to be problems. You don't know what you don't know. And until the thing actually gets burned in for a model year, and the number of different models that are going to be using Ultium tech is pretty staggering. I've been putting together a slide deck, and it seems like every week they're adding a new model. There was just the Mystique, which was just added, I think, 2 weeks ago, and then the Optic a few weeks before that. Of course, the Escalade IQ, the Blazer Equinox, the list goes on. GMC Sierra EV, I mentioned about the Bright Drop. There's lots of things going to be using this tech. And I think from what I'm hearing, the bugs are getting few and far between. And so if that's speculation, and it's, it's conspiracy theory, I don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of feels like we've got a winner here. And one thing about the numbers that Eric was circulating, GM is still the #1 domestic manufacturer of vehicles. A lot of people show up into those showrooms and purchase vehicles because they're in the showroom. So if they start producing EVs, putting them in showrooms, they're going to sell. And people will look at them, oh, it's nice and shiny. Oh, yeah, I heard about this EV thing. I'm going to give it a shot, and drive it, and it's, fine. And then they take it home. So I think if the production occurs, they're going to sell them. And as long as there's not backlash from buyer's remorse as a result of people calling in lemon laws or anything like that, they're going to be successful. And so what we're looking at is a shift to electrification of the #1 domestic manufacturer, which I think is a pretty significant deal.
I hope to see it. I've, we've all been on, GM's case and on their side, I think, from over the years, as whether Bolt EV or Cadillac Lyric, and moving into the trucks. I want to see those things out there and competing. But
and your 5 was a first model year, was it not?
Say again?
Your Ioniq 5 was a first model year, was it not?
Yeah, and I would say, yeah. I mean, there's, they all seem to come with some kind of 12-volt issue at some point. That
and then they get ironed out, and then they work it out. Yeah. They figure out the devil in the details, and then they have a good product in the second model year, third model year. And I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I forgot to put a rear wiper on it until the third or fourth model year, so we haven't got that yet.
It's okay. You're using the pilot sights now, so you have the
I just
squeegees,
use
right?
the force.
Yeah, you just.
If anything gets too close, I see the lights.
No, I was going to say though that the Blazer has some notable issues, right? We've seen 2 different publications complaining about the Blazer, and everything that was on their list is something that's common to 12-volt battery systems. And in fact, it was funny because some of the things that they were describing, I was in my Ford Ranger and it started doing these weird things, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And the traction battery isn't installed yet, so there's nothing to charge the 12-volt battery. What I didn't realize is the 12-volt battery had drained and all these bugs started happening, and it was like, what the heck is it? And with the Blazer, what's both, I think, hopeful and disappointing is it sounds like the exact same issue that a lot of Lyric owners were complaining about. And it seems like it's something tied to the 12-volt to 12-volt converter, or the DC to DC converter, the traction battery to 12-volt battery converter, because they changed it because Ultium supports over-the-air updates, right? And in fact, there's a notice for the Lyric. You're not even supposed to service your own 12-volt battery because the onboard DC to DC converter could activate and be pushing a charge out at any point in time, and you don't know when that's happening. And so it seems like this is all tied back to that system, all software, and people's 12-volt batteries are likely just randomly dying because they didn't program it properly. And you turned your car on a Saturday morning to go get groceries and it's bricked and you don't know why. And it's all tied back to that 12-volt system. And the reason that's kind of disappointing is we've had the Lyric for how long now? And the Blazer is basically identical underneath the skin.
That was exactly what I was thinking when I saw that report, is that the serial data module, which is what my root cause was, didn't get flashed in that Blazer, and they just put in the module and they didn't flash the firmware, and that was that.
Yeah, and that to me is sort of disappointing. I hope there isn't that kind of siloing going on within GM where the engineers aren't talking to each other simply because there's like a brand sitting between them. That's a problem to me. So hopefully they get it resolved quickly, and it is just not a big deal. Like you said, the version 2, version 3 of the Blazer, Lyric, all of those are just trouble-free. But for now, it's a newsworthy story apparently. So
okay, instead of sitting in the garage with a dead battery, let's talk about hitting the road. How do you like that segue?
yeah.
I'll to the comments though. I'll the next section will be we'll go back over everybody and just anything we missed, because that was quite a broad topic. We didn't hit any one specific thing, so we'll try and go back over you. But with the holidays fresh in our memories and some travels there that will kind of lead us on to the NEVI sites, funding, what we're getting for our money, that kind of thing, and the map behind Eric, which you can talk about. I'm trying to see what's what there. It's quite far up. So from my side, we were over in Ohio, which is kind of ground zero for NEVI site, or site zero as we called it, because Politico decided that there were no sites in the ground when that one got lit up. So that was a happy moment, and certainly was trumpeted by everyone from the governor on down. So I got a chance to go and visit that just west of Columbus a little bit, which will lead us on to some talking points later on. On the way back, I hit this site behind me in Pittston, PA, which is maybe a little less value for money. It was hammering down and the canopies were nowhere to be seen. So the shelter that I had in the place where I didn't need it was not there in the place where I did. But we had some interesting places. I ticked over 50,000 miles, and now we're at 52,000 miles because, shout out, hey Stephen, St. Peter up in Bucksport, Maine. I went up to see him and do some interviewing and filming up there over the last few days. So I've been here, there, and everywhere. A lot of it with good fast charging sites, and then slowly slipping out into kind of remote areas in Maine and running out of fast charging in some areas. Walter, you've been on the road as well, from what I see from your reports.
It's been a busy December, and even the last day of December, I was sitting here minding my own business, and I opened PlugShare, and there was 4 new sites that opened, one of them kind of close to me, and I felt compelled to at least go check it out. I was very curious to see what the thing was like. So yeah, I had a business trip prior to the holidays, and then there was a couple of trips during the holidays, and then over the New Year's Eve day, I went and hit the first Mercedes-Benz charging hub at a Buc-ee's on Interstate 95. It's really been remarkable how much has been happening out here in the Southeast, because not only is Mercedes-Benz opening up locations like they're going out of style, there's multiple builds going in all over the place, and it's near impossible to track. The Walmart thing I thought was pretty significant too. Walmart diverting away from EA and putting in native Walmart chargers is happening. It's not being talked about anymore. And that is, again, happening in the Southeast. So the state of Florida seems to be blowing up. The local electrical utility is Florida Power and Light, and they seem to be putting in DC fast chargers out there like they're going out of business as well. So definitely a lot to keep track of over here.
Yeah, I think that Walmart update was that was huge, Walter. So thank you for sharing that, because now it makes me wonder, like, how many sites, right? Like that we always talk about. It's a sort of a joke at this point that Walmarts have Electrify Americas, but when you look at the number of Walmart sites there are in the country, it's really only a small fraction of them that have Electrify America. And to me, it's the question is Walmart going to double down and add them to the sites where Electrify America is already there? Or are they going to target the sites that they have that don't have chargers yet? So yeah, it's going to be interesting what Walmart does. I'm kind of impressed by the fact that they went with ChargePoint Express too. So
yeah, and it was also interesting to see that they indicated thousands of Walmart. So they're not going to be targeting the same locations. Well, the same approach that Electrify America, which is basically a charging stop along an interstate in a metropolitan area. What they're doing is they're just building them at the Walmarts for their customers. So people who don't have an ability to charge at home can swing by the Walmart, get groceries, buy themselves some clothes, and have their car charged ready to go for the week once they come out. That seems to be the indication of what I'm getting from reading the press release. So a little bit different approach.
Yeah.
And how are they building out those ChargePoint Express Pluses? What kind of power are they pushing from the bricks?
200. So unlike Mercedes, which is 400 per dispenser, they're putting 200 per dispenser. So I did pick that up in one of the PlugShare notes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was gonna say there was something about the Power Link. Is it the one that? My understanding is ChargePoint Express can split power at the dispenser. It's regardless, right? Whether it's PowerLink 1000 or 2000, but it's only PowerLink 2000 that will split across dispensers. But maybe I'm mistaken on that.
That could very well be correct. Yes, I have heard that there is a way of loading across the site, and it might be that upgraded model is what's necessary.
But normally, like, Steve, you've had more experience with the Express Plus than I have. Have you encountered any that couldn't share power at the dispenser?
Nope. Everything's had shared. The only thing I've had is again that kind of broad range of power. You know, the ones up in Maine that I did use this past week, with the 200 kilowatt max that Walter's talking about. I think I have come across one that is up to 400, and bizarrely it's at a Ford dealership over in Central Mass, which is useful when the sole Electrify America station over there is packed to the gills. But I'm not entirely sure. I think some dealerships are building out these really high power units, and I'm not entirely sure what the strategy is there, unless it's for, I don't know. I mean, I suppose you need to fill up the lightnings quickly, perhaps. Maybe they want to show that kind of thing, but it seems oversized, overpowered for Mercedes. They want to focus on speed and getting people in and out, and it's kind of that experience piece. But for a Ford dealership, it would have to be, I think, about the size of battery, surely.
Well, I think there could also be an aspect of throughput, right? Like if you only have the space or room to put in one or two DC fast chargers to support your inventory, you want to be able to cycle through them quickly. So that could be an aspect of it too.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to see because the dealer piece is kind of, I mean, it's always been there, right? Nobody really wants to or prioritizes dealership charging, and in the past it's been the kind of sad stepchild of plan B or plan C of long distance trips. But some of the sites now are getting quite compelling. If they're open, I mean, obviously that's the biggest piece is you need something there with an open restroom and that kind of thing. But some of the places, they're very, very hospitable. You get these reports on PlugShare that people said they gave us coffee, they gave offered to show us around the vehicles. And obviously if you're on a 400 kilowatt Express Plus unit, you're not going to be there long enough to take a test drive. But there's a lot to be said for it bringing in people and potentially getting a lot of goodwill, Google reviews, online credit, that kind of thing.
Well, and if I were a dealership, or if I were an automaker encouraging dealerships, I would want them to set aside a bank of 4 to 6 chargers and go out to the different charging providers and have them install their latest charger. So like one EVgo charger, one Electrify America charger, one ChargePoint charger, and have a smorgasbord of the different public charging providers, and give your customers the ability to test out their accounts, verify the accounts when you have them there, and then give those charging providers a little bit of advertising too, just by hosting their units on your dealership lot. And that I think that would go a long way in those EV sales of getting people who are new to EVs and don't understand the charging infrastructure, a chance to test out the different equipment and see how it works before they commit to buying a $40, $50, $60, $70,000 car. So
it's also a way of having a bunch of EV enthusiasts cross paths with your salespeople and actually inadvertently train the salespeople because they're having conversations. Yeah. And then no, don't say it's totally it, man.
You've gone too far, Walter.
Salespeople come up to me and they're like, "Hey, are you charging this EV here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "How do you like your EV?" I'm like, "You're a sales guy. You should be telling me about it." And
just bring your invoice book with you so you can write them out. This is my hourly rate.
All right.
No, I mean that's a good point though. At the dealerships, a lot of this training, and Mike Mahan in the comments is a star at this stuff out in Southern California. It happens at the Electrify America station, or it happens at the EVgo station when someone looks confused and kind of starts to whip out their cell phone to call support. You can kind of help them. And Eric, you touched on this a little bit in a couple of the streams where there's a lot of just user confusion, whether it's tapping a card that should be inserted or inserting a card that is the wrong, type.
Yeah, and I was going to mention this last time, and we ran out of time. But I was at
2 hours wasn't enough.
Yeah, no, it was not enough. I was at an EVgo station recently, and I plugged in, did plug and charge. I was just eating my lunch while doing a shopping trip, and someone plugged in with Mach-E GT, and they couldn't get these 50 kilowatt chargers to work. And I gave him about 5 to 10 minutes because I could see him fiddling on the app. And I went over to him after I was done eating, and I asked him if he had an RFID card. He didn't have one. He was trying to set the account up on the app and trying to use the app and then trying to call them. And I said, well, you can also just try a credit card because I know their app has been problematic sometimes. And he's like, I don't have my wallet with me. So he didn't have any form of payment with him. Yep. And I don't know about you, but I don't memorize my credit card number. So if you have the EVgo app and you're trying to put in an authorized payment, if you don't even have a credit card on you, how are you going to activate any charger at that point? So I mean, I kind of left him to it, but it was just sort of bizarre to see someone at a charger for 15 to 20 minutes because he was still there when I left. So I came, plugged in, charged, ate my lunch, and left, and he was still there basically the entire time, hadn't activated the charger, but he had no form of payment on him at all. So I don't know how that works out.
That's someone who thinks plug and charge is a bit further along than it actually is. While we're on trips and travel, I want to call out Sky Malcolm for joining us, and he did a pretty epic trip. He does a bunch of epic trips actually, but a lot of people visited this Columbus NEVI site. One of the policy directors from Lucid was there about an hour or two after me. Sky went through. One of the ladies on the EV Go policy team who's on LinkedIn was through there. So it's getting a lot of attention. A lot of people are kind of making a beeline for that. So Sky's joined us here, and obviously is making a lot of kind of trips over those kind of routes in the Tesla, but trying to stop at these places and kind of getting a feel for the process there. I guess my biggest takeaway, I really didn't include this in the video that I put up, which seemed to get some interest, but I actually went to the nearby Electrify America at the Walmart in Columbus. It's only about 20 miles down the road, just after the NEVI site. And this will bring us on to our next topic a little bit later. But so I pulled in. I didn't really remember exactly, what it was like, and it is older. I think it was older Signet hardware down there. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, who's local. But there were 8 stalls. They were kind of accidental pull through. Those ones where there's enough that they're kind of 2 in a row, and if you are willing to block one of the other charging stalls, you could use it as a pull through. But it aside from being complimentary fee, which is obviously always a benefit compared to 59 cents a kilowatt hour, the pricing was still at that kind of Electrify America rate of 48 cents, off plan, for 36 cents on plan. If you were paying 8 dispensers, as opposed to 4 handles from 2 dispensers, everything was online as far as I could see. It was charging a Bolt who was in their car, not watching movies. And sadly, but it had, a lot of these things. Again, I don't think it was, it wasn't something that you would hold up as a glorious kind of site, but in terms of, it activated about the same time frame. It gave me as much power as the newer kind of Delta units at that Columbus site did. And in general, if you wanted to point to it as, the 24/7 amenities and the canopy, obviously, as kind of behind Walter there, kind of stand out in that kind of setup. But more chargers, probably a lot more retail. Walmart has its place. I think there seems to get its kind of detractors, but when you're talking about bathrooms, potential to do all kinds of shopping, whether it's going camping, getting supplies for on the way out to the holidays, on the way back because you didn't shop before you left, there's a lot to be said for that, I think. And it just kind of struck me that this was my second choice and not what I was really filming. But if I'd have done, and I may still do this, the comparison video of the 2 sites, it wouldn't be that hard for the Walmart to come out on top. So just
Well, and that's something I've been harping on for a long time, Steve, is that when I'm very much charger agnostic. And so when I'm on my trips, my primary choice is based around what is there to do at that charging site. So how long do I expect to stop, and what do I expect to be able to do when I'm stopped? And you're right, like a lot of the time, a Walmart is going to make a more like compelling stop for me than a pilot station will. So
yeah, thanks Dennis. It is the Signet standard, and this is the old brand of Signet that looks kind of faded and doesn't have any of that fun black cladding, so it's not necessarily something that you roll up and trust. Okay, did I miss anything on holiday travel, DC fast charging programs? Or we're going to get back onto the kind of value for money side and the funding in a little bit, but didn't want to cut anyone off before we go to kind of questions and comments.
No, I didn't do any traveling, so yeah.
You got the map there behind you. We're gonna plumb you for opinions pretty soon. Okay, so do keep leaving questions and comments down here, but I'm gonna fly through. We have Bill in Tampa, Florida, 2 CCS cars, wants to take advantage of the supercharger network. Let's talk adapters if you want to, with an extension cable. I don't see that happening. How about you guys?
Yeah, because of liquid cooled. So only V3, because they're the only ones that talk CCS. And from what I understand, there was a thought that I had also, and it seems like an answer, but because those cables are liquid cooled, you can't make an extension for it without getting pretty exorbitant in the cost. So
yeah, I think I might have mentioned this on a previous stream, but I would use real caution with buying any sort of an adapter. at least for short term, because all the public charging providers are going to be supporting CCS1 natively for years to come. I would be surprised if they eliminated CCS1 within this decade, right? And so you're always going to have that native option at the public charging providers, at least for the foreseeable future. And Tesla is only allowing access at sites where either they provide the adapter, or then that's the Magic Dock where it's built in, or if they're working with a specific automaker. And at that point, they're working with that automaker to distribute those adapters that are authorized to their customers. So I really just don't see where there's space right now in the market or justification to buy any sort of third-party adapter. And even though it should just be a physical adapter linking the J3400 to CCS plug, they might possibly introduce some sort of additional physical handshake into those authorized adapters that would basically disallow you from using a third-party adapter on a supercharger. So I would proceed with caution, and I certainly wouldn't spend any money at this point on one of those adapters. So.
And in terms of the kind of transition, I mean, Mike asks about paralysis. I don't think, based on what we're seeing and the number of updates that Walter has to do every week, that we're in any kind of paralysis. But certainly, what are you thinking, Walter, in terms of the transition and how quickly we're going to, make that to J3400 and many more native plugs like that?
Yeah, so I spend time at DC fast chargers pretty regularly, and it's not because I do a lot of trips. When I go into the office, I typically stop at 1, 2, 3 times a week, just because it's on the way in. And I talk to a lot of people at chargers. Plus, I go on road trips and whatnot. And I just don't see these people talking about NACS or J3400. They're talking about, the color of the car, and, they just bought it and new to EVs. So I don't really even think that's on anyone's radar who's outside and new purchaser. So I think people are buying cars the same way they've always bought cars. They're looking for something practical that will be able to get them to and from, and perhaps make some kind of personal statement. And the underlying technology is a little bit aloof to them. So
just nerds on podcasts that are talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and I mean, and that was why my big contention with the NACS release and proposal as it was is it's ignoring the fact that there's 100% interoperability with CCS. So you get all of these people talking about, oh, what's the standard? And as what Walter was saying is, if you buy an EV and you can roll into a charger and plug in and it works, you don't really have any questions after that. So really, I think the whole NACS J3400 CCS debate, that might be question number 2, which is, can I charge here? And then on the flow chart, if yes, I'm done. If no, can I use an adapter? So it's literally like second tier below in terms of anybody's thought process about, they just want to know, can I use it? And if not, is there a way I can use it?
And we're talking about a lot that early mainstream that we're moving on to, and I think there will still be some crossover, that some of them will be the early adopter enthusiast kind of type, but it's going to be far fewer people than in that initial thing where we're going in and doing exactly what Walter was talking about, teaching the sales folks about the cars, and there's going to be a lot more people who need those questions answered, and it's going to be basic stuff. It's not going to be what kind of standard does this use, what kind of port am I looking for, what adapters do I need, all that kind of, until later on. They're further down the track.
And Steve, Big Barney here brings up a very good point, is I think a majority of the questions are going to be coming from Tesla owners. And part of that is because right now they're in an ecosystem where they're directed to superchargers, but there's going to be more and more Walters, there's going to be more and more yous and me's who are pushing out information about these alternative charging options. And you're going to have literally hundreds of thousands, maybe at that point, millions of Tesla owners on the road who are seeing these amazing alternate options to the superchargers and saying, can I use that? And that's a much more detailed question to answer for Tesla owners, because do they have a CCS, the CCS PLC module built into their car? If not, then they need to get it from Tesla. Do they have an adapter, right? So those are I see the bigger questions coming from that group, not necessarily from the mainstream automakers at this point, because I think it's going to be very straightforward. Here's your adapter. Tesla will let you know if you can or can't use that particular supercharger. For everything else, you're going to have basically native support from the public charging providers.
Yeah, and I can say as a former Tesla owner, the supercharger network has kind of like a feel to it of survival. It's like we're making it, it's okay, you know, sort of thing. And these stations here are not about survival. These things are about comfort and welcoming customers and things like that. So at a Ultium station in Williamsburg, Kentucky, off 75, and a Model 3 pulled up. They had the adapter, they connected it, and it didn't work. And I happened to be there, and I walked over. I said, "Is there something I could help with? You guys having some kind of problems?" They said, "Well, we just got this adapter and it's not working." I'm like, "Well, there's a EA station right over there if you want to try the EA station." They said, "Well, we tried it over there. It didn't work either." And I saw that they had the chrome around the windows. I'm like, "Oh, 2019. It doesn't have the CCS module in the charger." And I didn't know how to break the news to them that you guys bought an adapter. It's not going to work. But they had that same kind of starry-eyed look. You know, we're under a canopy and we've got these great new 350 kilowatt chargers, and we want to use them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I'm hoping, I don't know that much about Tesla internally in terms of, we already know, I guess Kyle Connor from Out of Spec was testing this Cybertruck, and he apparently the adapter won't fit over the fender, so he had to pull the fender off, and then the CCS adapter would work, but it still wouldn't work on an EVgo charger. I believe it was a CCS charger. And so either Tesla has done something in the software to prevent using non-superchargers with the Cybertruck, or it's not. And this, I don't believe, is that it's not shipping with the capability. I have to imagine it's purely software for something as new as a Cybertruck.
It'd be a shame, because a lot of the sites that we're talking about and we'll continue to talk about here are much better set up than a lot of the superchargers, right? If they don't have that side-on kind of pull-through stall, then a lot of those, they're designed for those small, uniform, you know, homogeneous sedans and SUVs kind of in a line. You know, the Cybertruck's going to be stand out like a sore thumb at a lot of those.
Well, at least on paper, the Cybertruck should have the fastest peak charging rate of any sort of personal EV that's being sold, but it should only be able to achieve that on 800-volt systems. And so you would really think that Cybertruck owners would want to prioritize the 800-volt charging infrastructure. But it looks like right now, that's not a possibility. So.
Okay, let me race through here, and then we'll get to Walter's favorite subject, canopies, and the associated funding for them. I missed a few folks here. Ron B, Happy New Year to you. Thank you for joining us. Jay Donaldson, regular, joins us. Thank you very much. Evening and Happy New Year. Sky corrected me quite right. It's North Carolina. I think Rivian's in Georgia, and I need to visit the Southeast more often.
Chem Power is actually not in Charlotte, though. They're in Raleigh.
Raleigh? Okay.
Actually, specifically Durham.
Okay. I will get out a map and start burning up on my southeastern.
It's raining here in California.
That doesn't happen. I'm reliably informed. You also don't have winter, so cut the FUD. Leonard just joined. Oklahoma delayed NEVI awards once again. I'm sorry about that. That sucks, and I wish we could get a bit further afield than. Well, I know Alaska and Hawaii announced them, but I don't think any of us are going there anytime soon. So. Yeah. Some middle of the country, further than the Midwest would be great. What else did I miss? Electrified light vehicles pointed out. Yes, GM is offering that credit in the meantime. That's a positive. And I'm racing through here. Sky. Mike Mahan is after some canopy sites, and that's getting me pretty close to our next topic. I missed this a little bit. FPL. Is anyone familiar with
Florida Power and Light?
Florida Power and Light. Okay.
Yeah, they were the sort of only Yeah, they were the sort of only alternative 350 kilowatt chargers to Electrify America in Florida for a while. So
There's one I noticed in Orlando because I was looking at like the highest stall count opening from last year, and inevitably it was Tesla was one of them with a 16 stall site, and Magic Docks. But just below it, I think. Well, no, Revel had one that was 15 at one of their super hubs in New York, but those are only like 75 kilowatts in many cases. But the one down in Orlando, one of the public utilities down there, had a 16 stall site that was only like, I think it was 240 kilowatts. It was marginally below Tesla's, but it was still 16 stalls. I'd never seen that site before, but it looked pretty impressive. What else? I think I'm pretty much caught up here. Plug and charge on Tesla since 2018. Yeah, but with adapters and what Walter was talking about, there's going to be a little less plugging and charging and a little more figuring out whether you have the ability to charge. Bolts on 350 kilowatt chargers. Well, gives them more power. So,
peanut butter and jelly.
Yep. For Sky, amenities are second criteria for a stop. First criteria is simply wasn't full. Yep, congestion is the main piece. The reason we stopped at this one, actually no, wasn't that. I wanted to stop here anyway, but we skipped one of the commonly busy locations on I-80 in Pennsylvania that just it's one of the last stops you can get before you head further west. And these stations are now starting to flow into places where I can skip stations, and that's, I think Eric's talked about that a lot. You want to be able to kind of go to the place that suits you best, or if you need that kind of, this is congested, I don't want to deal with that, you just roll on and find the next one. Let's see, did anyone else have anything kind of jumped out at them wanted to answer?
I think Leonard might have had a good point that this is a good reason why they might have disabled it on the Cybertruck if the adapter isn't rated for 800 volt. So
yep, good job. Bill, how many Magic Docks will there be? Current time of recording, I think we're on low 40s in terms of sites, and they've covered probably it's got to be close to 20 states now, 15, 20 states. I think we just don't know. We've got to see how this rollout goes. No, there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason to the rollout. Some of the sites have been incredibly useful, like the one in Moab, Pacific Northwest. I know Anthony has been, one of the regular viewers has been super excited that those are there because it's not a hotbed of reliability for Electrify America. But yeah, it's not, there's no kind of definition to it yet. I think it will just be, where they can fit it into their schedule. And it would be nice if there were some places that were, actual gaps, places we really need these things. Indiana to Chicago or Indianapolis to Chicago seems like one of the places where it's Electrify America or die. And, more often than not, it's die. So that kind of place would be, because they opened some other Indiana locations. And, I don't think they're looking at it in that kind of wider, this is where the EV infrastructure needs to be improved. I think they're looking at it from a kind of Tesla centric point of view, which, is the way that they do a lot of things. And that's what's going to keep happening, I think. Magic Dock deployment's still growing. Hasn't stopped. Yep, for sure. When the Magic Dock program started, I think there wasn't that much expansion through the summer. I think all the sites were the same. It was kind of a handful of sites that were in the teens all the way through to possibly September. And then they started another kind of round, and it's doubled, tripled since then.
Yeah, I still have my doubts about whether they can do any more Magic Dock in California, because their chargers aren't meeting those requirements. So we might be stuck at 2 for a long time. Mm-hmm. So
I'm going to try and move us pretty quickly through here, but I've missed a lot, so apologies. And thank you for being so active, I guess, is the flip side of that. Brad says, cable length, 2 parking spots. This is, there's going to be a lot of this, and we've talked about it before, so I won't stay on it too long. But, it's a lot of shifting the potential problems or congestion from Electrify America and to a lesser extent EVgo and to Tesla superchargers, where they're going to potentially do a lot more damage, depending on the site. And obviously some places are busier than others, but if we're shifting to places on, say, the California areas that you visited, Eric, the Long Island and kind of Brewster place that everyone went when the Magic Docks first opened, those are busy, regularly busy, and there's not that much other CCS infrastructure. Long Island's probably fine, but the Brewster, New York site, around Connecticut and some of those kind of mid-Hudson areas in New York, there's not that many places that you would, have an alternative charge at that level. So I can see that getting pretty messy and unpleasant place to be. And at the moment, I kind of, as we talked about a little bit and Sky alluded to, you kind of want to dodge these places. I don't want to go somewhere where everybody's going to be jostling for position and there's no formal, etiquette really to queuing other than you hope people are going to be nice. But, that isn't going to be the case on peak travel days. There's going to be times when people are hot, annoyed in the middle of a journey. And I can see us, although it's been kind of positioned by some as a magic bullet, this just starting to shift some of the issues that we've had at, public charging to Tesla Magic Docks in the start, and then more to people with adapters futzing with the spaces, not having enough cable length, repositioning the cars. That's not a place that you want to be trying to charge a Tesla at that point, I don't think.
The truth is there's a lot of animosity on social media about these types of topics, but the experience that I have when I go to superchargers and I discuss that I'm not a Tesla owner, if I've rented a Tesla and I'm at a supercharger charging, they're just happy that there's EVs out there. In the real world, I think people are just happy that there's EVs, and I think as other EVs get there, I don't think there's going to be as much animosity towards non-Teslas. Kind of like a country club getting invaded by general population is kind of like the description that's being put out. I don't think that is accurate, at least to the places that I've been and the people that I've spoken to. Generally, they're good people, well-mannered, and they understand that if you're in an EV, you need a charge. So if you need to take two spaces, by all means, I'll move my car. It's all
Walter,
good.
we got to stop talking about real people, and we need to focus on the Tesla bros. I mean, there are, like I said, I think maybe at this point, millions of reasonable Tesla owners, and I think you're right. Most of them probably actually have a different EV, even a non-Tesla EV with them, and so. Like I would say, the actual real people out there are not the people that you're seeing projected.
I would simply point you to Brian Ribby or Jim, Iowa Tesla guy, and their
Great
videos.
people.
Loveliest people in the world.
Great
and
channels too. Love the content.
Yeah, frequently espousing other EVs. Brian especially loves his Polestar, local showroom dealer. So there's just a lot of good people out there. So probably getting off social media is the answer of that, rather than worrying about what's happening in the charging stalls.
And Steve, though, on that topic, because I'm old, and I remember using gasoline. And I mean, I know that gas stations, there's tends to be sort of a communal sort of idea about how you queue up for a gas station, but it can be really cutthroat too. It's like, oh, I pulled in and now this other person pulled out of this other aisle, so I'm going to try to jam across, but then someone else was and so
you better pull up too, so you're not.
So I don't know that it's really necessarily all that different. Crowding is going to be a problem no matter what the fueling station or fueling type. And you're going to have, I'm sure there are probably arguments and fights at Costco gas stations, but so I think that's inevitable. Like you said, on the holidays, we're just going to have to be the bigger person, right? And be, reasonable and communicate with everybody. Just over communicate what your expectations are and try and keep things orderly and civil.
He said, plugging his Bolt into a 400 kilowatt Mercedes-Benz charger.
I got a movie ticket.
Mine. They've got places to be. NEVI sites. These it's easier to queue at a site with pull-through parking or pull-through charging, right? Or easier to line up. So with that kind of setup, NEVI sites without them and NEVI sites with the kind of lack of amenities in the back of me here. My video I think it was just published at the right time, but it definitely got a lot of interest in terms of, for that, the two sites I visited, this one and the one in Ohio, are combined just shy of $1.3 million in federal funding. So, a lot of these sites, the ones in Pennsylvania that I looked at, were ranging between 500, 600,000, which I'm assuming is going to be this kind of standard 4-handle setup at 150 kilowatts. And then there's a couple that were close to $1 million or just over $1 million. So I'm assuming those must be like 8, because they're in areas where they really need, a good presence for fast charging, and there's not much either side. So I'm assuming $1 million ones we're going to get, at least 8 handles. But for these, there's a lot of these at this 4-handle level and the kind of thing that we're covering and we've talked about already. Is that good bang for our buck? Is it acceptable to be kind of doing the minimum? I know we get excited about these kind of canopy sites, and the dispensers are working well, nice new machines and all the things we've talked about. But when it comes down to it, is that 2 dispenser 4-handle setup good enough?
And I think we started that conversation, right, Steve? With
I'm going to throw videos up here over the top while we talk.
Yeah, because I think if you break it down, especially for like the EV Go sites, but just in general for NEVI. Yeah. Oh, that was me. It's about $1,000 per kilowatt of power, of throughput, and that seems like a lot of money. But what I was mentioning is I think people aren't giving full credit to just how much it costs to rip up a parking lot in a busy gas station, install a canopy. The canopies are usually 30, 40, 50, up to $80,000, right? And then you talk about the permitting, landscaping, planning, easily over $100,000. So you're eating up half of that $600,000 before you're even talking about how much you're paying for the hardware, right? So there's that issue of that initial upfront cost just to get the site in the ground. And I think that's one of the reasons that Tesla scales as large as they do, is because as you add more and more chargers, that base level cost doesn't really change. So really what you're looking at is probably $350,000 for 2 350 kilowatt split power chargers. And if you added a $300,000, you could get up to maybe 4. And I think that, to your point, Steve, though, is they're funding 600,000. So we're just going to do that, when you could just put in another 300,000 of your own money or funding from other sources and literally double the size of the site. And you don't have to just do the bare minimum according to the NEVI funding standard. And I think that was a story I'd shared about the Recargo site in Prunedale before they were purchased by EVgo, is while everybody else was getting California Energy Commission grant funds and we're building 50 kilowatt chargers, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 50 kilowatt chargers per site, Recargo turns around and puts in 6 200 kilowatt chargers. There were no cars that could even charge that fast at the time. And you look at the funding, and they went out, and in addition to California Energy Commission grant funds, they solicited funds from like the Monterey Bay Clean Air Resource Board, and they brought in additional grant funds so that they didn't have to just do the bare minimum, added Tesla power packs to offset grid tie energy and demand charges, like way over the extra mile. And it was actually that Carl Pancut, who was the site designer, who now is the CEO for EV Range. So he did a great job, like doing that design, doing the soliciting of funding, and going the extra mile. And maybe that's what we're really talking about here, Steve, is you get $600,000 doesn't mean that you should only be building a $600,000 site. So,
well, Walter, you had commented on the video that there was other money going in there. They were putting in, especially Pilot Flying J, which is big. They won a lot of the contracts in Ohio. That there's other money going in there, and it's obviously a part of a wider program. What's your kind of take on the level that's being built, and when they get NEVI funds, should it be an order above what they're building at the other sites you visited, or is this exactly the track we should be on?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it brief because otherwise I can consume a lot of airtime here. So 3 things. One, as you say, of the 25 locations that Pilot Flying J installed in 100 days, basically one DC fast charging stall per day for 100 days, 8 of those, or 2 stations, were NEVI funded. The rest were privately funded otherwise. And the 2 NEVI funded sites, one of which had a canopy, there was out of pocket in order to get that done. We don't know how much because we're not privy to the balance sheet of Pilot Flying J, but there was a certain amount of the purse that was ponied up by Pilot Flying J in order to get those 2 sites lit. There was an interview with the Ohio folk where they mentioned that they had equipment stationed, ready to go. So the reason why they got first is because they had a warehouse full of charging equipment ready to go on the ground, and they had pre-purchased all that. So there's that. Secondly, the cost, which isn't really being factored in here, is that when this station here in Amarillo, Texas gets installed, let's just say $1 million. I don't know how much it costs, but let's just say this got put in for $1 million. It's got 4 stalls. A comparable gas station would have cost, let's just say for round numbers, half that much. Canopy, whatever, gas pumps, you got a tank underneath the ground, you got to dig up and put in. The gas station is now tethered to a system where petroleum needs to be delivered in trucks. The fuel is delivered near the theoretical speed of light using domestically produced fuel. So the distribution of the fuel is not tethered to a system where fuel is being trucked in liquid form. So, okay, upfront cost might be a little bit more, but dang, man, we're getting fuel for vehicles transported across the national grid. There's got to be some economic factor associated with that, at least in my opinion. That's kind of being lost in this conversation. There's a major economic benefit to using electrons traveling at near the theoretical speed of light being delivered into distribution points for vehicles to get fueled, whether or not it takes 20 minutes or whatever. So
Walter, am I hearing you right? Are you saying that gasoline cars have a long tailpipe?
Yeah, so there's a whole system behind them, right? And the electrical vehicles are untethered from that. And, even domestic, privately produced solar, you can fuel your vehicle on. Thirdly, NEVI funds also include provisions for operations and maintenance. So what Ohio is doing, and each state is also allowed to author these policies to their own liking. But Ohio is requiring 97% uptime with reports in order to receive the maintenance and operation funds on an annual basis. From each fiscal year, they'll receive funds in order to offset operations and maintenance. I was wondering how the NEVI provisions were going to police the uptime provisions, and now I know. They're going to withhold the operation and maintenance funds for sites that don't meet the provision. So there's the hook that they have into them. So yeah, there's NEVI funds, and yes, it looks like on paper it costs more, but there's operational and maintenance values associated with those costs, and also the inherent economic efficiency to delivering fuel to vehicles using the electrical grid is not being discussed. And I feel as though that's a major miss. But as far as the 4 stations and the 12 stations, I think the sad truth is we are way behind the curve on the number of DC fast chargers we need to be putting in. We need, we've got Walmart, we got Circle K, we got 7-Eleven, we've got Pilot Flying J, we've got Mercedes, we've got Racetrack, we've got all these people putting in DC fast chargers. It's still not enough. We got Tesla superchargers going gangbusters. We need more. And truth is that once the price drop of EVs is below internal combustion, we're going to have these things all over the place. And hopefully people who are trying to attract customers to their businesses will start putting these things in at a faster rate.
Yeah.
This definitely brings us on to this next part, but I do want to give people a kind of something to watch, especially in Pennsylvania, because, as I said, NEVI funds in Ohio are pretty heavily slanted towards EVgo, Pilot Flying J. In Pennsylvania, they're much broader. I think there's 54 sites that were awarded funds, and they're across the board. There's Tesla in there, Travel Centers of America, Love's, Pilot Flying J got a bunch. So you're going to be able to see how much they were awarded and what they put in the ground for that, on a physical level, that you could visit all of these things along the way, as they get built. So keep an eye on, Ohio is kind of straight at the moment. It's pretty much going to be, what we saw in Columbus for most of those, but the Pennsylvania installations are going to be interesting, especially with that kind of Tesla wild card and what they're going to put in the ground there.
Well, and I think that's the other question too, is Tesla, I think, sells a lot of stuff at cost for their chargers. And so you don't really know how much they're subsidizing their rates. So there's that other factor to do too.
Yeah, and I mean, there are 3 sites there. We haven't really talked about the third one in Kingston, New York, which just kind of got slid in there because they happened to be, obviously have to be within a mile of the exit of the interstate. For this round of funding, at least, they just happened to have a good site that was, ready to kind of light up. And I think they saw the kind of overlap and were able to say, because this didn't go to solicitation, this wasn't on any map, prior to, other than Evolve New York, having it in their pipeline to light up. So I think they were just able to kind of, slide in and get the funding, added to that site. So not all of these are, as Walter said, the Pilot Flying J, 2 of them are NEVI funded, but that leaves 23 that are still, out there on Pilot Flying J's dime completely.
And let me just chime in really quick. Someone posted to PlugShare for a site on Interstate 95, Pilot Flying J, and he said it has 3 dispensers, 6 stalls. I'll be there on Monday. I'll confirm if that's the case, but I think there may be larger. Like Eric always said, hey, you can't put in 4 stalls in California. So I think there might be a little bit of recalibration of the number of stalls, and I'll find out on Monday if that's actually the case.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to go too late here, but the one of the things that common complaints that people have made is that if one of those dispensers go down, that's only 2 stalls. Then it's not like if the EA sites where 1 goes down or more go down more frequently, but if 1 goes down, they've still got the 3. So there's that failing potentially, and also they're not, part of the spirit of the complying with NEVI is that they all can continuously deliver 150 kilowatts plus, and that should be a baseline. But I haven't tested it on these ones, but there shouldn't be a whole lot of difference other than these were the kind of assembled in America, build American, buy American requirements. But they still have that 500 amp on one, but 200 amp cap on the second handle when there's 2 vehicles charging at the same time. And in a lot of cases, that's not going to matter. You're going to need either 2 EGMB cars or a Lucid or potentially a Rivian to really kind of push it. But, there could be scenarios there, increasingly common scenarios, where you have 2 very high demand cars and they're not getting the power that is in the actual compliance of the NEVI requirements. Again, it requires the station to be full, the right cars to be at the station, them not to be too high charged. So you're getting into that kind of theoretical Tesla thing where they can't all charge at 250 kilowatts at once, but it doesn't really matter because that happens so rarely. But there's potential compliance issues there as well with the equipment specifically that EVgo and Pilot Flying J are installing there. Any more for any more?
Do we want to do a closeout with the Kansas?
Yeah, absolutely. Now we can finally tell people what the map is behind you. I'm sure people.
It's Dodge City over there. Yeah. So Kansas announced their first, I think, 5 NEVI funded sites, and I mean some of them were huge. I think Walter, you and I were just chatting about this. Was it the U.S. Highway 400? It's a massive dead zone in the middle of Kansas. So, and a lot of people, it sounds like, use that to cross, across Kansas. It's a very good shortcut. And 2 of the sites are planted right there on that US 400 route. Garden City, I think, and Pratt was the other one. And so so they announced those 5 sites. It's or 6 sites, sorry. Emporia, Garden City. So Emporia is a Flying J, Garden City Loves, Cherokee is a Pete's, Fredonia is a Pete's, Belleville is a Loves, and then Pratt is a Casey's. So they have 6 sites that they've announced. So I mean, middle America getting their charts. So
yeah, those need to happen. To answer AB's question, the funding, at least NEVI wise, prioritizes interstate routes first. They want to get that visible travel corridor along all of the designated corridor in each state built out, and then that releases and frees up funding for more remote areas and away from the interstate. So that's at least what you're going to see in Ohio, Pennsylvania, probably Maine a little bit in the kind of first wave of this funding going out. What else did I miss? Uptime's a big one. We're kind of running out of time here, so I guess let me hand it over to you, Walter. What would you like to kind of close on? Any topics we missed? Anything that you want to see from DC fast charging as you visit all of these many programs that are rolling out?
I'm very interested to see the 7-company consortium become an entity, and I understand the C-suite is shortly to be announced, and I'm assuming shortly thereafter they're going to name themselves and conceivably some concept art of what their stations will look like. And I believe what we're looking at is the first ever in the world nationwide charging network that is building their own sites with their own facilities from the ground up. And I'm really interested to see what that will look like. Tesla has done like 2 sites that have unattached Tesla facility of some form. But this will be nationwide, kind of like a McDonald's approach where every site has some sort of amenity. And, I don't know if it's going to have fast food attached like a convenience store. And I'm really curious to see how this thing is going to actually look.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it actually continent wide? Is it all of North America?
I'm sorry. No, yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, so it's Canada for sure, and Mexico, I think maybe as well. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about Mexico, but yeah, Canada for sure.
Yeah, so at least the 2 northern American countries.
Eric, what are you hoping to see from DC fast charging this year beyond California and beyond? I guess you have to think about the travel, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll say one thing that I don't want to miss out on is I want to see when is Rivian going to open their network as well. And to Walter's point about all of these different companies opening up their sites, that's really the balance, I think, is distribution versus site concentration. So everybody can say that they want 8, 10, 12, 16 stalls per site. But if you came to me and said, I'll give you an option of 1,200 sites across the country with 4 stalls each, or 600 sites with 8 stalls each, at this point in time, I might opt for the 1,200 stalls or the 1,200 sites with 4 stalls. So smaller sites, but higher distribution, because we're still trying to see that balance. And then, and I also think just distributing sites is going to alleviate some of those woes that you were talking about with the holiday travel and big queues. You only see those big lines at big sites. When you have 4 to 6 stalls per site, maybe you have a couple of cars waiting, but you're never going to have this massive influx of 40, 50, 60 cars waiting at one of these mega charger sites to get access. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of these other little networks starting to pick up. ChargeNet, they've opened, I think, their second site, and they have 2 more in queue. That's the one with the Taco Bell. They do the full solar canopy. So I'm looking forward to checking those out. EV Range is doing a lot of great work. They're covering Highway 395, which they're one of only a couple networks doing that. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in 2024. So
for sure. I'm excited to see. A few people mentioned kind of forecourts and charging hubs. I know we don't want that to become, or that doesn't need to become the norm, and the stall count is not necessarily have to be huge. But I think some flagship sites, like Mercedes to an extent, but also just places. There's one I'm hoping will really blossom in Central Mass here that is supposed to be an EV discovery center. And that's what I want to be alongside the gas stations that they also have there is people can wander over maybe and go into a place that's quieter, calmer, be able to see different models and have that kind of the experience we talked about with the dealership a little bit, to see cars and to get people talking to them about electric vehicles, but also in a place that's not high pressure, get that kind of Polestar kind of feel where it's they show you the car, they just kind of have a relaxing place to kind of look at EVs whilst your car charges. But also, the main kind of networks just really starting to see competition, because I think, we didn't touch on price much here, but it would be nice to get, places where we can say, right, well, if you want to really ramp up the price, or, if you want to put in a site that doesn't have very great amenities, there's 2 or 3 places down the road where I'm going to head because it's cheaper, more reasonable, better options to eat, drink, go to the restroom, whatever it is. Have those places that you can, be able to mold your journey how you want it rather than how the chargers want you to kind of stop.
Right.
And with that, lots and lots of folks commented. Thank you so much for joining us. This gets bigger every, I won't say week because it's fortnight, but every 2 weeks that we do it, this kind of cranks up a little more. So thank you everybody for joining us. You can email me if you have stuff you want to discuss, if it's not in the comments here or I don't catch it in the replay, plugandplayev@gmail.com. Send any topics you'd like to cover, because sometimes we kind of, ramp these up at the last minute, especially with GM sales. So we will be happy to cover stuff that you would like us to as we go into our probably 80th minute here and I overrun again. Thank you, gentlemen. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
We
Year.
will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Woohoo.
Cheers.